Across deserts, rivers, and seas, millions of refugees take extreme risks to seek safety every year. Images of their journeys regularly appear on our screens, yet the dangers they face is beyond comprehension for most of us. But not for Canadian war journalist Matthieu Aikins. He's lived the journey himself, posing as a refugee in 2016 to help his friend and interpreter flee Afghanistan. His new memoir, The Naked Don't Fear the Water, chronicles his underground odyssey across land and sea on the smuggler's road from Kabul to Europe. I got a chance to talk to him recently about his journey and the insights he gathered along the way. Many people have written for a long time about refugees, but going undercover, posing as a refugee for months is something else entirely. How did you get that idea?
An Afghan friend of mine named Omar, he decided to escape his country. So he wanted to take a smuggler's road to Europe, and I wanted to report on the crisis. And the only way I could go with him, given the danger of being arrested or kidnapped, was to go undercover as an Afghan refugee myself.
It starts in Kabul. Somehow, after many twists and turns, you and Omar arrive in Turkey, and from there the plan is to reach Greece with the help of smugglers. How was that part of the journey?
We were taken by our smugglers to the sea, where we were forced to board a little boat in the middle of the night. You know, these boats can lose air, they can be attacked by the Turkish Coast Guard or trying to take them back. And so it's frightening. But, I grew up on the sea and I had also chosen to be there. For many of the refugees, this is the first time they'd been on a boat or been on the ocean. So they felt a much greater terror.
Could you talk about maybe one experience, one moment, one anecdote that you think would illustrate to our audience the type of dangers or conditions that we're talking about here?
At one point, we were on the way to the boat on the Turkish coast. We were crammed into this van. There was way too many people inside of it. And the driver got worried at one point, kind of stopped and left the van there. And I couldn't help but think of, the 170 people who had suffocated to death in a meat truck in Austria the previous year, which was, an event that really shook the conscience of Europe. And so it was a kind of scary hour that we were there, but eventually the driver came back and we continued driving.
That must have been really, really scary. How was it for you to put your own life in the hands of smugglers, and how do you find a smuggler in the first place?
Well, in a country like Afghanistan, where people have been fleeing from war for 40 years now, it's not hard to find a smuggler. The sad truth is most refugees need smugglers to escape their country because they're not allowed to travel legally. They need visas, which they won't get. So while smuggling is not an industry that encourages honesty or kindness, they're not really the root cause of the problem. They're convenient scapegoats for politicians, but the fact of the matter is that border controls create smugglers. And you see that on the border between Afghanistan and Iran. You see that in the borders of Europe. You see that in the border between the US and Mexico. As border controls get stricter, so do profits for smugglers increase and get more criminalized. And you still have the same number of people, if not more, crossing.
Now, how do you feel about the state of Afghanistan today, and what would you like our audience to know about it?
Well, unfortunately, Afghanistan is facing a catastrophe for which the West and its failed mission there is directly responsible. We built up over 20 years one of the most aid-dependent countries in history, and so suddenly cutting off that aid has had a predictable consequence. The government is basically not functioning, salaries aren't getting paid, the country's financial system is really being frozen by these sanctions against the Taliban are now in charge. And unfortunately, the Taliban have not shown us very many positive signs that they're willing to govern more inclusively. But one thing we have to understand is that for not just today, but over 40 years of war, a survival strategy for Afghans has been to migrate. So I really do think that the world should be, supporting Afghan refugees and migrants and making it easier for them to cross borders, not harder, which unfortunately is the case right now, that Afghans are being trapped in their own country by borders and by laws, by visas.
What is next for you? I understand you're in New York at the moment. Do you have any plans to go back to Afghanistan? Do you have another book?
Yes, I'll be going back to Afghanistan very soon, and I'll be working on a story for the New York Times magazine about the current situation there. So we'll be going back to see the country that I still very much love, in spite of everything that's happened there.
Ben Chamiso, Newsy.